and I will invite us to all try as much as possible to keep time, and that appeal goes especially to those who will be delivering speeches or papers. To start with, my name is Charles Odongtho, and I'm a journalist, and I ply my trade in this town at the UBC, the national broadcaster, but also at the ICT ministry. I'm going to be moderating the discussions this morning and pray that we finish in time. My instruction is that we are supposed to be done by around 1 without missing anything. Before we go further, allow me invite Edward from the Ministry of Water. Edward from the Ministry of Water to come and give us a formal opening prayer. We have had a slight change. We are going to begin even before the arrival of the chief guest. Many of her colleagues are already here, so we will begin and she will find us along the way. Edward, you're most welcome.
Let's humble ourselves and pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the gift of life, and we thank you for the time that you brought us together. We thank you for the government of Uganda and the leadership of Uganda for the enabling environment that we are here today. We thank you, Lord Father, for the partners that you've brought together, MDS agencies. We seek and beseech before you that you nurture the bond that you've created, so that, Lord, we push the nutrition agenda to the objective that we need to achieve. We commit this meeting under your hands, that every deliberation that's going to be undertaken, and the panels, Lord Father, will bring together, will be guided by the wisdom that comes from above. We thank you and we commit everyone into your hands, and to all that's living in Jesus' name.
Let's give Edward a better clap. Shortly I will be sharing with you the rules of the ground rules. A simple one, that when someone makes a good point and you decide to clap, you clap well. Okay? That's one of them, and we will be adding on to the rest. So I want to start by asking us to recognize the members of cabinet who have already joined us. We have Honorable Moroli Mukasa, Minister of Public Service. Honorable, you're most welcome, and thanks for being here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We also have Honorable Bwino Chakulaga, the Minister of State Agriculture. Thank you very much, Honorable. Next to them is the Honorable Jennifer Namuyangu, the Minister of State Bunyoro Affairs. Thank you very much, all of you, for coming. Certainly, I recognize many of you in all your various capacities, heads of agencies, authorities, departments, and especially our good organizers, the OPM, the guys who have been in charge of the organizing this national information platform for nutrition phase 1, and it's about the national situation of nutrition in Uganda. Now, I had prepared a lot of things, but I was asked to just summarize whatever we are going to be discussing in a few header. I had mistakenly thought nutrition is about good dieting. Then I was told that, look, nutrition is about, it can also be about timely eating. It's about the diversity of what you eat. It's about the right hygiene. It's also about the right quantity. That's very important. The right quantity of food. And then another tip which I was given that I should share with you, that nutrition is not, and that is not was capitalized, is not about availability of food. It is about the quality of a number of things that we eat, including water that we drink. Now, an example was given that you may have very good food in very good quantity, and you eat it timely, but if you drink bad water, then you have failed on nutrition. Did you all know that? Apart from the experts. Me, I'm not an expert. I'm just a lay Ugandan, and I wanted to understand it at its basic. So that's how we have to understand it. So it is an interplay of a number of things, which will remind me that that item you see in front of you on a platter is not a decoration. So feel free to pick a piece. Whether it is if it is an onion, feel free to chew it. If it is paper, you know, feel free to eat the paper. If it is pineapple, just eat it the way it is. That's the instruction I was given. So you have nothing to doubt, and I was given these instructions by specialists, okay? But if it is an orange, that's well and good. So we have to ensure that we partake of it. So, and finally, the one that I learned today, the other tidbits, I had picked a bit of them here and there with some level of, you know, innocent ignorance. But the most interesting one, I was told by the experts, is that as far as nutrition to human beings is concerned, the most important is the first 1,000 days of our life. From, Now, why haven't the rest clapped? You knew about it. You are innocently ignorant. Now, I was told from conception, that is when the brain starts developing. And if you get it wrong, those first 1,000 days, then you will never get it right. So, from when someone or some people become one, nutrition becomes very essential. Up to the second birthday, that's about the first 1,000 days of our lives. So whatever we are going to be discussing today, think about that when your wife, or even your daughter in some cases, or even your sister is pregnant, from the time you know it, maybe it is late, maybe it is not yet late, because many men know at around 7 months, 8 months, even when someone is about to give birth. The ladies, women, senior women usually get to know that someone is pregnant at about 2-3 months. Sometimes even the pregnant person does not know. So how do you handle it? These are complicated things, right? So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to start by inviting the Permanent Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister in charge of Strategic Coordination and Implementation, Mr. Walogembe Edward. He is representing the Permanent Secretary, Edward is, and he is here to give us the opening remarks on behalf of the OPM Permanent Secretary, and then we will move to the next presentation by you, boss. Mr. Walogembe, you're most welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together to welcome him.
Thank you very much. Before I go into the Permanent Secretary's speech, let me make a small correction, because I'm not yet there, but I'll get there maybe. I'm the Commissioner for Strategic Coordination of the Prime Minister, standing in for the Permanent Secretary. So that small correction I wanted to make. The Right Honorable Prime Minister in absentia, Honorable Ministers and Ministers of State, Your Excellencies, the ambassadors, all heads of UN bodies present, Honorable Members of Parliament, representatives of permanent secretaries, chairpersons and executive directors of government agencies, which is crucial in shaping the nutrition landscape and overall development of our country. So I want to welcome you to this dialogue. Just to give a small background, and I'll be very brief because we need to mind and manage the time. In 2018, the European Union supported government of Uganda through Office of the Prime Minister to start the National Information Platform for Nutrition Initiative. That's what we call NIPIN. Others call it NIPN, but we call it NIPIN. NIPIN facilitates multi-sectoral and multi-sector whole dialogue on nutrition and supports the use of existing information and data to develop or refine policies and programs to address malnutrition. The objectives of NIPIN are: 1, to create capacity within national institutions to operate and maintain a national information platform for nutrition, to strengthen capacity to track progress in meeting national objectives to prevent undernutrition and monitor nutrition investments, to build the capacity of national policymakers and program planners to make better use of evidence in designing and implementing nutrition-related policies. And NIPIN is supposed to bring a lot of information, and I'm glad the moderator has exhibited some gaps which he has filled today. Uganda Bureau of Statistics, and a lot has been done, and as we shall see, they present the situation report on nutrition. The findings from the presentation, it's our prayer that they will inform policy, that they will inform our behaviors, and will try to improve on the health outcomes of this country. And of course, the recommendations that are made, it's our prayer and belief that they'll be put into utilization. So it's not about having a report, but what do we do with the information that we are getting out of this report? So it's cut out for us. We need to work better, behave better, and obtain the nutrition objectives. So I want to welcome you all. The rest will come later, but I want to welcome you to this dialogue and hope and pray that you make good deliberations out of this, and then you come up with recommendations that we shall be able to implement. I say this for God and my country.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Mr. Edward Walogembe. I've been informed that there are some MPs amidst us. I wish to recognize their presence, led by the chairman of the Parliamentary Forum on Food Security, Population and Development, Honorable Anthony Akol. Thank you all, members of Parliament, if there are others who are amidst us. Allow me now invite for remarks from the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, the persons who collected the statistics of the situation report, and here represented by Mr. Nabong Godfrey, the Deputy ED. You're most welcome, Mr. Nabong.
Thank you. Thank you, Charles. The Right Honorable Prime Minister of Uganda in absentia, honorable ministers here present, heads of missions, international agencies and development partners, honorable members of parliament and other political leadership, religious, cultural, and civic leaders present, stakeholders of the nutrition governance. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Allow me to deliver corporate greetings from the board, management, and staff of the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, and in equal measure, join the PS to warmly welcome you to this nutritional dialogue. Ladies and gentlemen, at the Bureau, we believe that good nutrition is a catalyst to social and economic development and is central to the achievement of the prosperity of communities and the nation at large. The Bureau is therefore privileged to be party to the government endeavors to ensure prosperity for all through delivery of nutrition and related data services. On this note, therefore, we reaffirm our commitment to spearhead the efforts geared towards addressing the nutrition information needs of all key stakeholders for purposes of evidence-based decision-making. This nutritional dialogue comes at a time the National Development Plan midterm review is taking place. And as you may be aware, nutrition is core to the achievement of the Human Capital Development Program of this plan. We therefore believe that the discussions today, and indeed your contribution, increase the national understanding of the importance of investing in and monitoring nutrition programs in Uganda. In Government of Uganda initiative, implemented by the OPM in partnership with UBOS. This initiative leverages on the existing rich pools of data and other data sets to derive and track nutrition indicators and in turn provide in-depth analysis and appreciation of the nutrition status in Uganda. The existing data sets that include that from the annual panel surveys, the demographic health surveys, annual agricultural surveys, and the food security and nutrition assessments series, among others. So, ladies and gentlemen, the nutrition situation report to be presented today specifically is derived from a component of one of the surveys highlighted earlier, that's the National Panel Survey. The report communicates the findings on the nutrition situation as established by the panel and game-changing solutions to the hitherto nutrition challenges facing the leaders of tomorrow, largely the children. As I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I wish us a lively and a productive national dialogue on nutrition, and also appeal, especially the media fraternity, to take in and make use of the findings as well as share them widely. For God and my country, These are remarks from the Executive Director, Uganda Bureau of Statistics, Dr. Chris Mukiza. Others, I'm Godfrey Nabongo, his deputy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nabongo. Just a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, that we have to, as we interact throughout this occasion, we have to keep in mind that COVID still exists, and that we also have Ebola, so you have to continuously wash your hands with soap and as much as possible sanitize, but also take care so that we all continue living well. Allow me now, ladies and gentlemen, invite a representative of UNICEF. We have, I think, amidst us the nutrition manager, Mr. Zach Fosheni. You're most welcome.
Thank you. The Right Honorable Speaker, the Right Honorable Prime Minister, Ministers of States, Members of Parliament, heads of agencies from the development community, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I bring you greetings from the development partners who are active in nutrition, made up of both donors and UN agencies. First, want to congratulate the government for organizing this particular forum. It's quite a very useful one for all of us. Just a thought. Last week I was in Toro region. I met a boy who was stunted. We have a lot of food. It's one of the food baskets in Uganda. A few weeks ago, I was in Karamoja. I met a young girl who was severely wasted, what we call severe acute malnutrition. This child did not have enough food. Why? Because of the food insecurity that we have in Karamoja and perhaps other parts of the country. Yesterday, I was walking on the streets of Kampala. I saw a young girl who was too heavy for the height. In other words, who was obese. This paints a picture of what we call the triple burden of malnutrition. And so the world is dealing with crisis where we have children who are undernourished, not feeding well. At the same time, we have children who are overeating more than what they need. And I want us to reflect this as we have this discussion and get the statistics and see how we can inform policies. What is driving this? When we move to the global level, we know for today, 1 in every 3 children are not growing well. That is at the global level. 1 in 2 children are lacking the necessary micronutrients. In other words, which we call hidden hunger. 2 in 3 children are not being fed well. That is getting the right diet, the right food that they need. This is another gloomy picture that we're facing for 3 reasons. 1, we have a climate change in our midst that is driving the kind of food we grow, the kind of food we eat, but also both the quantity and the quality of the food that we eat. we have conflict, both at the global level, but also at subnational level. That is also driving ability of farmers, of households, to produce enough food to feed their children. In the midst of this, we have COVID. Information that we're gathering is that COVID is going to have much more impact on malnutrition of children. COVID may go, but it will leave a legacy, which is not positive, a negative legacy on children. We're already seeing data that is showing that we're going to have an increased cases of what we call wasting. We're going to have children who are stunted more in addition to what we already have. So why is this important? It is important because we need to reflect and see how we can use data to inform policies and programming and ensure that we achieved the desired results that we all need to invest in nutrition and to make sure that the future generation benefit from us. When you look at one of the policy documents in Uganda here, from the Minister of Health, that is the MICAN, Maternal, Infant and Young Child Nutrition. It is telling us that Uganda is losing 5.6% of its GDP to malnutrition. In addition, stunting is costing Uganda about 19 trillion shillings. These are huge resources, and I believe that it can help to improve both infrastructure and human development in other aspects. It is based on this that, once again, I bring you greetings from the development community and development partners, and to encourage all of us to look at how the discussions around today, how the inputs that we're making, how the decision we are making today is going to affect the lives of millions of children that we have. We acknowledge the fact that the government of Uganda is doing quite a lot. We have policies in place. We know Uganda is one of the, what we call exemplar countries, which has reduced stunting quite substantially, that the world is watching. Despite this progress that we are making in Uganda, we may not achieve the Sustainable Development Goals for stunting reduction, which is also in the NDP 3, a target that we have. We also know that there are programs in place that are ongoing, both to address the immediate underlying and basic causes of malnutrition. But more effort is needed. We call on the government to invest much more in nutrition. Investing in nutrition is a smart investment, and development partners stand by you and with you to ensure that we work together towards achieving this and produce children who will inherit us and better manage Uganda than we are doing now. Because everyone wants to have a child who can be ahead of you in terms of development, in terms of every other aspect of life. And that is what the desire of every child will want to see. The decision that we are making here will reflect in their lives. NIPIN, I just want to congratulate again the European Union, who has decided to invest so much in data. We know that without data, you cannot make any informed decision. Someone ever mentioned that without data, we are flying blind, because you cannot take any decision that is informed by evidence. This is why we congratulate you again, the government, and then the EU, for making that bold decision in supporting the nutrition information platforms that will benefit all of us. On this note, thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing a more successful program.
That was Mr. Zach Fosheni, the nutrition manager at UNICEF speaking on behalf of the development partners. But I didn't hear you clap well for him. If you were not satisfied with the points he made, at least he pledged that as development partners, they stand with the government of Uganda and certainly with the people of Uganda to ensure that the more effort that is needed is achieved. Thank you very much, Mr. Zak and your team. We are supposed to now, if you look at the program, be hearing from the curtain raiser for the Prime Minister's office, and but because the Prime Minister has not come yet, we are going to skip that part of the program and then go to the next. And then when she comes, we will do the needful. But before I invite the next presenter, allow me kindly, on your behalf, recognize the arrival and presence of the Honorable Agnes Nandutu. And she is Minister in charge of Minister of State for Karamoja Affairs. She is Woman MP for Bududa. Thank you very much. A very long-time friend of mine. We have been together in the trenches, and then she decided to jump the other side of things and left us this side. Agnes, you're most welcome and good to see you. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me also recognize the presence of Madame Alice Kaboyo. I hope I've mentioned the name correctly. She is Minister of State in charge of Luero Triangle. All these are ministries that fall under the OPM, and thanks a lot for recognizing and gracing this occasion. Now, ladies and gentlemen, allow me invite Mr. Muwonge James, the in charge of the analysis unit at the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, to come and give us the presentation of the nutrition situation report. You're most welcome, Mr. Muwonge. We are all ears for you.
The Right Honorable Prime Minister in absentia, the Honorable Ministers here present, Honorable Ministers of State here present, heads of missions here present, distinguished participants from the private sector, ministries, departments, and agencies, and the media, and all of us, you are most welcome and good morning. Mine is a short task and a simple one. It's really to present highlights. It's not the full story, but to present highlights of the nutrition component, which was part of a larger survey. That is the subject of discussion this morning. In terms of the outline, I just have a few items to talk about, give a bit of the objectives of the survey, a bit of the background of the National Panel Survey, and touch on methodology a bit, but really the key thing is the findings. I don't know if it's very clear, but this is, the survey was mainly to provide us national representative survey information on a number of areas and on different subjects, including nutrition. but also it helps us to be able to monitor what's going on over time and to measure progress in different areas, including nutrition. But the panel survey also is helping us to facilitate a number of other studies which can be benchmarked onto these surveys, including impact evaluations in the areas of nutrition. Now, this is a panel survey. Panel survey is a longitudinal survey where we follow the same households over time. And so, unlike where we go to visit different households each time we go to carry out a study, in this particular one, we have been following the same households since 2006. About 70% of the households. We have been following them since 2006. And about 1/3 we have been refreshing it. And the idea is to see what's happening over time to these households. Okay. And in terms of the analysis, this is, as I said, within the Bureau, there is the analysis unit, but also under the NIPIN 1, it was boosted to also be able to undertake analysis specific to nutrition. The indicators we are going to present are based on the demographic and health survey guidelines, the 7th series. Now I must also mention that what I'm presenting here this is the series number 1. There will be a number of series. There is some analysis that's being done, especially on biomarkers, because we are looking at biomarkers, to be able to look at vitamin A, to look at the iron and folate micronutrients. So that report will also come, because it is specialized, and we are working in partnership with Ministry of Health and the Center for Disease Control. Okay. So there will be another dissemination where we'll be focusing on only the biomarkers. And of course, in addition, there also, as part of the survey, we've been collecting the type of foods that people eat. And so the aspects of food fortification will come as part of the biomarkers. So that series also will come. And so when OPM invites you again for another round of dialogue to discuss that, please respond. I will straight out talk about the low birth weight. I just delve into the statistics. As you know, low birth weight for expectant mothers has a risk associated with it. And when you look at the numbers, it shows that at national level, there's been some improvement, but 1 in every 10 babies born is less than 2.5 kilograms. And ideally, a normal baby should have above 2.5 kilograms, but we still have about 10% who are born when they are less than 2.5 kilograms. Now, stunting, the representative of development partners has talked about the stunting. He went to Fort Portal and found a stunted child. This is impaired growth, resulting from either chronic nutrition deficiencies and also repeated infections. And so we have over 28% of children who are stunted. This could probably come to over 2 million children being stunted. And the implications, as they said, if you miss the first 1,000 days, Charles was telling us some statistics here. Now, if these children have missed, or they missed out, perhaps the impact on the human capital will be much there, so we don't know. And I think this is where the panel helps us, because we'll be able to try to follow some of these. At one point, we should be able to follow what is happening to these stunted children when they finally grow up, because we have data for several years. So we have those who were stunted in 2006. Maybe we should try to follow them and see what they are doing now, in as far as whether they are still pursuing the education career or they have gone into other activities. So we have a substantial number here which is still stunted. Much as progress has been registered over time, because we have been able to reduce stunting from over 39% to now 25 or 26. But the issue is, even one single child who is stunted is a cost to this government, and it's an opportunity that we can still be able to redeem. At regional level, I think as you can be able to observe, I think the Western region still fares poorly when it comes to issues of stunting. Now, child anemia, there is this is where they have low hemoglobin levels or low blood, and it shows that 4 out of every 10 children aged 6 to 59 months, it should be 59, were anemic. And so we have still that challenge, but also you'll see even amongst the adults, the statistics show that we still have about 44% of the adults also, heads of households who are anemic. Again, the representative of the development partners talked about a child who is obese. Now, obese, in this case, ideally there is a body mass index. Body mass index is used to measure whether somebody is in the normal range or you are overweight or obese. Now, if you are less than 18 kilograms per meter squared, then there is a problem. Now, between 18 and 25, that's the normal body mass index. Now, between 25 and 29.9, we are referring them as overweight. Now, anyone with a BMI of above 30 and above, are the ones we are categorizing as obese. And so that's the statistics that we have based on the panel survey. In terms of overweight, 2 out of 10, for those especially 18 years and above, were also overweight. Now that's, as I said, the body mass index is between 25.1 to 29.9. That's where the range for someone who has been categorized as overweight. Now, anemia among women aged 15 to 49, because that's the reproductive age. For women with the reproductive age, it's important that they have, they don't suffer from anemia, especially during that period, because as you have been informed, whatever happens from conception up to 2 years impacts on the child. And so we find that about 3 out of 10 women aged between 15 to 49, were anemic. And the regional distribution is as shown on the slides. And all this this is just highlights. The rest is in the book. Now, this panel survey also, we did try to look at, some of the non-communicable disease element that would be able to capture within the limits of the survey. And so the teams were able also to be able to measure the blood pressure levels of the respondents. We're working with the Ministry of Health and we provide the team with the equipment to be able to assess. And so far, that's the statistic. In terms of gender, it seems the men had a slightly registered, the prevalence was higher than that of females. And I think this region, central region, seems to have had more of those who reported that, whose results indicated that the pressure levels were above the limits. Now, as I said, this is a panel survey. It had a number of modules. One of the modules was on nutrition, where we look at, we specifically focused on women, 15 to 49, but also the children under 5 years. But in addition, also we had an agriculture module, which looked at the agricultural activities and production within a household, in addition to the other socioeconomic characteristics that household engage in. And so, as I said, nutrition is not just about food, but there are also nutrition-specific interventions that impact on children. And here, there are just a few highlights on the nutrition-specific. And later on, I'll be talking about nutrition-sensitive interventions. Now, in terms of early initiation to breastfeeding, 8 out of 10 children were breastfed within the first 1 hour. The recommendation is, I think, for the protection of the baby, I think it's important that the child is initiated to breastfeeding within the first 1 hour. The experts in this room know better. I'm getting to learn these things by associating with the experts. Then also we have the it is also indicated that a child should be exclusively breastfed the first 6 months. And after 6 months, this child should be provided with either semi-solid foods and a few other foods. But there also the diversity of the foods is key. And there are aspects of having more than 4 groups, food groups, that you should be having. And what it shows here is 1 in 10. And the 1 in 10 infants meets the minimum diet diversity requirements. So, and I think it has also alluded to the fact that they could be having so much food, but probably it's not that we don't consume it in the amounts that we would expect when it comes to how diverse are these food items that we have or we consume. Now, there is also the minimum meal frequency. How many meals do you take, especially for these children? There are those who are breastfed. Now, the number of meals they take, I think the recommended number of times is 2 to 3. But for those who are not breastfeeding, it's above 4. And so it varies depending on the feeding practice. That's what the experts did indicate. And so it shows that about half of the children meet the required number of meals, meal frequency. The question would be, what is happening to the other half? And so when you start building up all of these elements, I think we need to start reflecting on the impact, especially at that young age, and the cumulative effect over time. And so then there's also the minimum acceptable diet, which is a combination of the diet diversity and the minimum meals. And so we just find that 1 in 10 of these children either meets the required diet, acceptable diet. In other words, the 9 out of 10 fail the test. And in terms of residences, there isn't so much difference. There are 2 years here because we have a panel survey every year, but it shows there is really not so much difference. At household level, we also try to look at probably what influences what children take could also be a result of what adults take. And so we have the household meal frequencies, and where we have 4 out of 10 households, can afford 2 meals a day. That is if you include breakfast. Don't ask me what is on the breakfast, but as long as it is breakfast, we'll probably discuss that later. In terms of vitamin A supplementation, as I indicated, in this study, we did 2 aspects. There is vitamin A supplementation to boost the immune system of these children, and the experts tell us that prolonged deficiency in vitamin A could lead to blindness or other things. And so we find that at least 8 out of 10 are taken vitamin A supplements. But as I indicated, the biomarker tests, the results are going to come very soon, and we'll be sharing what's happening, because biomarkers is the analysis based on the blood, what the vitamin, the iron, the minerals in the blood. And so that analysis is still going on. But this is the vitamin A supplementation that the children, reported, or the mothers reported as having been given to these children. Then we also looked at deworming. Ideally, there is a recommended period where they should, not only adults, but even other children, even adults, I think we should be supposed to deworm ourselves. I'm not sure whether we do, but probably that will be another discussion. But for even children, we only find that about half of the children actually, received the deworming tablets, or at least they were, reported having been dewormed. And the distribution across residence, rural, urban, and regional level is as shown. Now, that is, as far as the nutrition-specific aspects are concerned. Now we look at the nutrition-sensitive elements of nutrition. Apologies for the colors, they are not very friendly, but what trying to bring out here is that when, irrespective of where you come from or which region you look at, whether it's central, eastern, northern, we consume so much of the staples. Okay? So staples take the lion's share of everything. Now, the moderator urged us to eat whatever is in front of you or of us. And when you look at the share there, it's only about 10% of the household that reported having, or consuming what is in front of you. So maybe as a demonstration this week that we have eaten them, maybe we need to clear them before we leave. And maybe they'll tell us. But what we're trying to bring out is that so much of it is staples. And yet in nutrition, the diversity, as far as the benefits of nutrition is concerned, I think we seem not to be having that diversity in the proportions probably that's recommended. And so maybe we need to do a little more there. In terms of food security, a number of households reported that they couldn't afford, they had difficulties, and of course food security is not just having food, but also the access aspect. And so even at regional level, now, please don't ask me why is this way when Karamoja, we have been having a story. This is 2019-20. So the situation now is different, and some of these indicators change very fast. But there is also a survey which we are about to conclude that will also be helping us. But also the demographic and health survey is we are about to complete data collection so that early next year we shall have more updated information on a number of these areas. Now, if you recall, there was a slide where I talked about, we looked at the shares, you know. Now here it shows how much you spend. Most of our expenditures goes to staples, so it's consistent with the other one, irrespective of which region. And so if we are to have a balanced, or if we are to diversify the diets that we consume, to be able to improve our nutrition levels, then also we need to think about spending more. Probably the question will be, do we have the money to spend? That's a different discussion. But the issue is, if we are to improve the nutrition status, I think we need to look to also start focusing on maybe how best do we also ensure that our parents, our mothers, our sisters, you know, start considering the other groups, you know, of foods, fruits and vegetables, sugars, condiments, spices, and so on, as also part of the wider, you know, diversification program. And so the other aspect is school feeding. Now here the focus was for those 6 to 12 years, and we asked whether they had a meal at school, and for 40% did indicate that yes, they took a meal at school, and most of it was mainly in Central. That's where it was reported at highest. But you know, of course, the other 60% didn't take anything. So that is also something we could perhaps think about. Now, as I said, this is just a summary and a bit of highlights. It shows that stunting is still a challenge. Improvements have been made, but there is still, you know, a number of children, our children who are stunted. Anemia is still high, especially among pregnant women and also among children. The low diet diversity, you know, as I indicated, is a challenge, and the frequency of meals and that children take combined with the minimum acceptable diet is still low. The staple foods is really, you know, our thing. It takes the lion's share of our budget. I don't know whether maybe because we grow it and from the garden we consume, but also maybe because of inability to acquire through purchase. And therefore, you know, the low household meal frequencies, you can't afford, some of them couldn't afford the 2 meals a day. And so a few were reporting those 2 or 3 meals. As the executive director mentioned, this has been a collaborative effort between the World Bank, the government of Uganda, the European Union, and USAID and UNICEF. And so there are elements, especially in the areas of nutrition, where we've been working with the European Union, the Center for Disease Control, especially to get the inputs through Ministry of Health, and also making sure that the health team actually does its work. Because much as we coordinate as a bureau, the protocols have to be followed, and the Ministry of Health and CDC have been at the forefront of ensuring that we don't violate any of those processes. So we would like to appreciate all the services, and I thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just request and invite us to clap more for Mr. Mwonge, who is the Director Methodology and Statistical Coordination at UBOS. Thanks for a good job. And I paid very keen attention to you, not just because I'm moderating, but because some of the statistics made me think of a lot of things. One of them that we need to, as we think about the percentage of Ugandans who are still stunted, children, you said over 10%? About 10% of Ugandan children born below the average weight, below 2 kilograms. Some of us were 4.6. So we need to thank our mothers, really. 4.6 when I was born. My follower, a lady, was 4.9. And she gave birth to 9 of us. And now I think that I need to thank her more. No wonder when she was crossing 50, she started having problems, back aches and then knee problems. Now I can understand some of the problems we give to our mothers. Isn't it important that you clap for them? And now you can see why some of us are these sizes, perhaps because of those first 1,000 days. But for me, with statistics, I think we need to ask the Muwonges more questions. They present the figures, the statistics as they are, and then they don't want to be asked the causes. I saw one of them that 2 out of 10 women of reproductive age were anemic in the year under review. But he doesn't say why. And yet, there is no solution minus knowing why. So I think statisticians, you need to, again, go back to the field, since this is a panel survey, and prepare us for the reasons that lead to some of these things, so that, the implementers, the ministers, the MPs, I've seen the director of manifesto implementation in the room, Mr. Willis. These are the guys who should be knowing, why are these women anemic? Why is in the summary you say the Western suffers most from stunting. Why? And yet we know that most of the foods we get in Kampala is from Western Uganda. So why are they not eating their own food before selling? Are they selling most of the...
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very honored to be here this morning. It's a privilege that I cannot take for granted, because I get to share my story with many millions around the globe, because I know many are watching or will watch afterwards. As I've been introduced, my name is Angela Rachel Nanziri. And yes, I've experienced this, because many do not know that this is real. It is real. Well, for my part, I think I would title my story as the plight of a corporate mother. And you will take a second, if you can. You will go to my LinkedIn page and see my full story there. This morning, I decided to retell the same story I told 5 months ago. Well, my predicament didn't happen 5 months ago. It actually happened 6 years ago. And for your information, I had to take a drastic decision to leave employment, and I was unemployed for 6 years just to take care of my son. So you will allow me to retell my story the way I told it on my LinkedIn page. Maybe I'll be able to save a mother out there who is going through the same. Well, my story then was titled, Anxiety is Killing You. That's what I called my story. I just, woke up in the middle of the night and decided to pour my heart out because I didn't know any other way to share this. Well, I have 2 children, if you must know, a boy and a girl, Tanzania and Amsterdam. But today I'm going to share with you about Amsterdam. That is my son that we are sharing about this morning. Well, the year was 2017, and my boy was only 9 months old. And back then I was serving in the bank. My employer was in the banking industry. And well, this is emotional. You'll pardon me when you see me go quiet because it brings back very hurtful memories. Well, it was one Saturday afternoon. I was going home and, one of the lady vendors by the roadside, she humbly asked, Nyabo, yegwe mama omwana oli, loosely translated, are you the mother of the other boy? Of course, she gave me a brief description, My childminder would, occasionally go out with my boy to take walks and all that. And then she said, omwana wo weetaaga okumutwala mu ddwaliro kuba tali bulungi. Loosely translated, she said, you need to take your child to the hospital because he is not well. I stood and then, I absent-mindedly just walked away because I was wondering, where does she get the guts to say that to me? I've not seen anything wrong with my child. But, she was an elderly woman and she only knew better. She knew what she was talking about. At least I didn't know, So, why was it weird that she would say my boy was sick? Because, my boy was chubby, that pseudo-chubbiness. He was growing fat, and I thought he was being fed well. But then, you know what? I decided to say, okay, let me go and check on this boy. So when I reached home, my childminder quickly said, Mami, omwana ono azimba ebigere, simanyi kizibu ki, loosely translated, that the child keeps, getting big feet, and she didn't know what the cause was. So I decided to go to a hospital, I went to Keserena Children's Hospital in Bukoto, it was an evening. So I sat there as the doctors tried to examine my child, and I could tell from the pacing up and down, something wasn't right. And then the lady, she was so sweet, and then she told me, you know what? We cannot manage your situation here, and I'm going to send you to Mwana Mujimo. So she booked me in, she made an advance call. And I almost got dizzy. Things were moving so fast. I'm like, now what's the problem? If they're referring me to a national hospital, it must be serious. So I went home, I packed my boys' bags, and then I went to Mulago Hospital. The first time I'd been to Mulago is when I was having my first child. That's the only experience I had until I had to walk through the doors of Mwana Mujimu Nutrition Clinic. If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. The biggest shame, I was well-groomed, I was a respectable young corporate, but then you're carrying a child that is malnourished. All the doctors could not believe it. Some ridiculed me. Olabika bulungi naye laba omwana wo bw'afaanana. All that got to me because they could not believe that I could look the way I looked, but my child was wasting away. So I went to the acute unit, and when the doctors examined my boy, I was told he had edema. And I think they told me the reason was he had a deficiency of protein in his diet. So he was retaining water in his body. That's why he was growing fat. And I thought my child was healthy. And you know, with my work routine, I would come back close to midnight, you know, and I would not have an opportunity to see my baby. And I thought all was well, but little did I know, because from the onset, my boy could not breastfeed. He refused to breastfeed, so he had an intolerance for milk. So he would not take milk, and the childminder was not alerting me about this. So he kept taking carbohydrate, you know, that brown porridge, obseda. He kept taking that without milk, and you know, I had no idea. You know, I cannot stop blaming myself. So he had fluid retention in his body because he lacked protein in his diet, and that's why he was all swelling up. But then I started noticing his skin color was changing. It was turning into yellow. He had scanty hair. So all that was revealed to me when I was at Mwanamujimu. So I had to be admitted. I was admitted for 3 weeks at the facility. But the doctors, you know, gave me some pep talk. You know, they said, if you want to leave this establishment real quick, you've got to humble yourself and accept to learn. That was the hardest thing, my people. It was the hardest thing, you know. You're looking at the mothers that are there, and then you're looking at yourself. There is a disconnect. These are people that cannot afford all the 3 meals we are talking about. You know, it kind of belittled me. It humbled me. Those 3 weeks in Mwanamujimu humbled me. And I cannot emphasize it enough. I don't know, I cannot really tell you for you to understand what I was going through. Because one, I could not breastfeed my boy. He could not be fed on a bottle. You know, they had to give him 75 meals of that special milk they give. Imagine a child is crying, you can't breastfeed because I wasn't breastfeeding. You can't feed him on milk. You know, they're injecting him all the time, you know, trying to feed him. It was very absurd. So, and then after the 3 weeks, the doctors sat me down. They told me, you can go back and work, and then you'll lose your child, because the risk was he was going to be stunted. Then his motor skills would be affected. So the lady told me, you have a choice. You can go back to your banking job and see your child waste, or you can sacrifice and take care of your child. Ladies and gentlemen, that felt like a 1,000,000-mile journey to the moon and back. Imagine you're used to that corporate life, you know, having whatever you need, and then somebody's telling you you've got to put all that aside. But then I told myself, if I lose my boy, I'll never forgive myself. So I decided to go to my workplace, and I put in my resignation, and it was with immediate effect. All my supervisors could not get it. I was to bear that burden for you. So I had to bear my burden, and the cost was for me to lose my job. And yes, I've been sitting at home for 6 full solid years without a job, but I'm very happy that my boy is now going to turn 6 in November. He's a very brilliant boy. He's taller than his big sister. He's very brilliant. And at the end of the day, I just patted myself on the back and I said, thank God I took this decision. Otherwise, I would never have forgiven myself. I pray that somebody learns from this story. And my parting shots to the people that trust us to earn our bread from your offices and organizations, I would highly recommend, if you can have clinics for mothers, that have babies. 3 months off the job is not enough. And the other thing, when you want to be young mothers, this is for you. child, there is a sacrifice that you're going to have to make for that child. Mine was 6 years. Just know there is a sacrifice attached to this. You'll have to put your personal life on hold for the sake of that child. And also to note that my children are just a year apart. I also learned in the process that it is always prudent to space your children so that they can all have the same time. Because now, when I had my 1-year-old, I was pregnant with my boy and I didn't know. So I would also encourage employers, have such talks, in companies, talk to your people. People are educated, but they don't have as much knowledge as we think about things that are simple as nutrition. So I would encourage strongly that at our places of work, bring in somebody to speak to those mothers. There are even fathers that, are single-handedly raising their children and have no idea how to go about it. So having somebody speak to them would make all the difference there is in the world. I'm very passionate about children because of what I went through. When I'm walking on the streets or in my neighborhood and I see children clearly that are malnourished, but you can't say much. A parent will say, "What is it to you?" So I've been yearning to have a platform to do it the right way. Reach out to mothers, teach them what they need to know. Something as simple as having information can save your child's life. I was educated. I hold a bachelor's. That's why people could not get it. What was I doing in that facility? Because they thought probably I knew a thing or two, but I knew nothing. And I've taught myself to be humble to learn, and I think we all should do the same. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Angela Nanziri Rachel, for your story. Big story, big lessons indeed, and I'm sure that many of us now understand and appreciate that it's not so much about your position, and thanks to the OPM and the organizers for organizing and ensuring that Angela shares her story. I think many of us relate very well with her story. And I like this, I think I like this dialogue. Again, more reason to thank Madame at home. Like you, Angela, she has stayed home since the beginning of COVID. And we have had 2 children, and in that period, and again, I have to go back and thank her a little more. She lost her job. She was working in Parliament of Uganda, and because of COVID-related layoffs, and now she has a 10-month-old baby, 10 months, I think 3 days ago. A boy as well. And so there is more reason to thank women like you. And we thank God. But big lesson for our leaders, for our people, to sensitize.
With a vast experience of over 30 years in nutrition policy development, programming, and implementation at national, regional, and global level. She worked as an education officer teacher from 1988 to 2009 in a number of schools, in which she was instrumental in popularization of foods and nutrition at advanced level of secondary education.
Finally, allow me to invite Dr. Beatrice Ekesa, country
Dr. Beatrice
representative.
Kesa has over 17 years' experience managing and coordinating implementation of research for development initiatives on agri-food systems. She works in Africa and the Pacific, and for the last 15 years, she has been based in Kampala, Uganda. Dr. Kesa has a PhD in foods and nutrition and works with the Alliance for Biodiversity International and CIAT as a senior scientist and country representative in Uganda.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for these wonderful ladies and gentlemen. And I'll start with the Ministry of Health. Sarah, your area of focus is on interventions. What present interventions or plans do you prioritize in that now famous first 1,000 days of a child's life? What is supposed to be prioritized? Technical team, kindly. Technical team.
Thank you very much. Apologies for that. Like I was saying, at the Ministry of Health, we have a number of interventions that are aimed at promoting good nutrition. So we have both preventive interventions and those that help in treatment of malnutrition in the first 1,000 days. When you talk about the first 1,000 days, that is from conception, from conception up to when a child is 2 years old. And one of our key interventions is in what we call the Baby-Friendly Health Facility Initiative. And also it also goes into the community. This is whereby we ensure that a child is breastfed as soon as they are born. I think our testimony showed that if you don't breastfeed, you really have problems. So once you initiate a baby during the first hour of life, and also support them to continue breastfeeding exclusively for 6 months. And there are a number of things that go in there as you're trying to make sure that the child breastfeeds. You have in the hospitals, you make sure that the hospitals are very friendly, and they give this information to these women as they come to give birth. Because you know, as you go back home, you really need to continue doing these things. So it's unfortunate that you find some of these women, when they give birth, they don't have all the adequate information. So that's why we really emphasize that. And we also have regulations whereby we discourage the promotion of breast milk substitutes, because those are very, very dangerous to our mothers. And that's why we have regulations. And we make sure that we restrict that marketing so that mothers are encouraged to breastfeed. And we also have micronutrient supplementation, where we give them vitamin A supplementation. And I think you have seen that the vitamin A supplementation is at 80%, almost 80%. So we are doing quite well. And also when we'll get to hear about the biomarker studies, you shall see that we have made efforts. So we have many of those interventions. And we also ensure that you have timely introduction of complementary feeding. You say after 6 months, that's when you introduce complementary feeding. And we try to make sure that we promote the production of these foods, which are nutritious and safe. So that as the children take these foods, they don't get sick, but they get the nutrition that they need. We also have a program where we promote healthy diets. When we talk about healthy diets, healthy eating, this is a new program at the Ministry of Health. And I think you have realized that we have many nutrition-related, non-communicable diseases. And even the president was very key in this intervention, where we have guidelines on healthy diets and physical activities. We also promote food fortification. When you look at the foods that we eat, many of them are lacking in micronutrients. So with this food fortification program, which is a private-public partnership, we add nutrients to key food vehicles which are promoted, which are eaten by our population, to make sure that we have good nutrition. We also do assessment, nutrition assessment, nutrition counseling, growth monitoring and promotion, so that you are able, and actually we really urge parents or caregivers, take your child to a health facility regularly for growth monitoring and promotion, so that problems are identified early. The health workers have the ability to identify malnutrition, to classify those who are malnourished, and to refer them accordingly. And then we manage those that could have fallen through the cracks and got malnutrition. We do manage them with the integrated management of acute malnutrition. So we have a number of activities, but since we have many other people on the panel, I could end there. Thank you very much.
Maybe just some quick follow-ups. You said take a child regularly to a health unit or facility. Is this with or without any sickness or illness, or just for normal check?
Yes, like I said, it is growth monitoring and promotion. So when you give birth, they usually give you the date that you should come back. And unfortunately, people only come back for immunization. After immunization, they don't follow it up. But once your child is below 2 years, every month, you have to go to the health facility. We also have community activities. When you go to your communities, you'll find that we have outreaches. Some of them in some districts are at schools, others at churches, but every month we have these nutrition, we even call them nutrition forums in some interventions, whereby there's an opportunity for you to take your child. So you either take them to the health facility or to the outreach center that is nearest to you. These facilities are there in every district. But unfortunately, people always ignore them. And you also have a child health card. I think you all know that once a child is born, they are given a child health card, which has a provision for you to write and to track their milestones. So that's...
Thank you. Let me come to Dr. Rukundo. How do you think WASH interventions improve nutrition outcomes from your perspective?
Thank you very much, moderator, and all protocol observed, honorable ministers, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Moderator, water is life, like we used to debate, and water is important for development in many forms. But to take it off from the aspect of nutrition, we know that at the starting point, water is important for food to be available. We talk about water for production. And we know now the challenge that we are facing of food not being enough or inadequate crop harvests due to absence of water. That's from the angle of food security. If the food is not available, then we have the challenges Dr. Mwonge was talking about. But when we come to the real practice in terms of its influence beyond the production, we know that water is key in terms of enabling us avoid diseases, but also be able to control diseases. And when we talk about water, we don't delink it from sanitation and hygiene. So what do we see? We see that where there is absence of water, where there is poor hygiene and poor sanitation, the risks for malnutrition are high. And actually, evidence from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine has shown that 50% of most of the malnutrition cases after 6 months of breastfeeding are predominantly linked to challenges related to poor water, sanitation, and hygiene. So what do we see also in Uganda? From the presentation from Dr. Mwonge, we saw that in early years, in early months of the child, the malnutrition is fairly low, with the low birth weight starting at 10%. And if you see the curve from the graphs we have, the malnutrition begins to increase exponentially after around 4 to 5 months, meaning that is the period when we are introducing other feeds. And because of poor hygiene and sanitation, oftentimes that leads to exposure to infections, worms and others, which then accelerate the problem of malnutrition. Like colleagues may know, the moment you fall sick, even if you have all the food in the world, the body will reject it because appetite will be low and all these other losses of nutrients due to the imbalance that is created. So we say that WASH is a major determinant of good nutritional status, and the issue is even more pronounced in children because we see even the water not being available can affect the mother in terms of care. We have a problem of maternal workload if women have to go long distances looking for water. And what does that do? It affects the time available for the mother to prepare an optimal meal for the child and even care effectively for the child. So yes, WASH issues have multiple effects on nutrition. One, through the food security angle by affecting food production, but two, through the disease angle by enabling, preventing us from effectively utilizing the food, but also three, the socio-economic influences on maternal workload and the ability for the caretakers to effectively dedicate time and attention to the needs of the child. So we can talk more, but water is key, and we should not forget it's SDG number 6. And we say that for us, water is a key SDG, just like SDG number 2 nutrition, because it has multiple influences on various spheres of development, including nutrition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rukundo. I want to now bring the discussion to Mr. Amen Tony, who works under the OPM, specifically with the Karamoja Affairs docket. Tony, there is the question of interventions for household food security, and we are talking at a micro level. In terms of what are the policies and programs that government is implementing to ensure that these households in Karamoja have good food security or adequate food security?
Yeah, thank you, Charles. Good morning, everybody, and all protocol observed. Before I proceed to that, I recognize, of course, the presence of my Minister of State for Karamoja Affairs, Honorable Agnes Nandutu, and other ministers from OPM.
You will keep your job for long.
And a promotion at that. Thank you. I want to approach this from, and I'm glad you brought it from the perspective of food security. Because to talk about nutrition in Karamoja, without talking about issue of food security, you'll not be addressing the real issues. I will talk about the programs and the different interventions that we are undertaking, but I also want to look at the challenges and opportunities that exist within our environment and the context of Karamoja. Now, as Minister of Karamoja Affairs, of course, our mandate is to implement affirmative action programs. And we're mainly guided by the Karamoja Integrated Development Plan. Currently, we're on, implementing the Karamoja Integrated Development Plan 3, and it's aligned to the National Development Plan. So that is what guides our operations. But also, we undertake coordination of interventions by the different ministries, agencies, and departments, development partners, NGOs, and civil society organizations operating in Karamoja region. In terms of the specific programs and delivered policies to address food security, as a ministry, we have made a deliberate effort to identify women groups across the region. Karamoja has 9 districts. It's quite unique in its own way. So the different women groups have been identified since 2010 when Mama Janet was still the minister then. And we provided efforts to a number of these groups as a way of enhancing the nutrition level at household level, targeting women, pregnant women, lactating mothers, as a way of enhancing nutrition again at household level. This has had a multiplier effect over the years, and is well documented in terms of the success it has contributed to. We have also undertaken the provision of improved and adaptable farming materials to different farmer groups. We are working with the Nabuin ZADI, the Narrow Zonal Agricultural Research and Development Institute, based in Nakapreprit, in Nabalatuk, in Karamoja, to generate and develop new crop varieties that, and then we distribute to communities. Of course, Karamoja has its own unique challenges in terms of the weather conditions, but the high-valued crops like rice, like a number of cereals, and they distribute to communities. But we are mainly targeting, smallholder farmers at a different. Of course, somebody will wonder that Karamoja is a dry dry region. Karamoja has both a green belt and then the dry belt, which is mainly for cattle rearing, but there's also the green belt moving from Karenga, Beam, Napak, and I know I'm mentioning these names. Most of us in this room perhaps have not been to Karamoja and wondering what are these. So those opportunities exist. But again, the livelihood of Karamoja is predominantly on livestock. So again, working with the IZADI, the Agricultural Research Institute, we're also trying to improve the breeds of cattle, crossbreeding, as a way of enhancing milk production. Recently, we've been working as a ministry, the program of distribution of goats as a presidential directive. We have identified different youth groups across the 477 parishes that in the all of Karamoja region, and we've distributed so far 74,000 goats to 15 youths in each of the parishes, the 477. That program is ongoing, and again, thanks to government, and we intend to continue more of that. We are also implementing a school feeding program in partnership with the World Food Program, and we have initiated our own, what we call homegrown food growing, in partnership with the Namalo Prisons Farm, based in Nakapreprit. And again, the food is grown locally and distributed to different primary schools as a way of enhancing and attracting children to come to school and part of nutritional support. And then now we have made a deliberate effort that in this financial year, we are going to encourage planting of fruit trees in primary schools as a way of enhancing the nutritional level again, but also at the community level. So that, among others, that is being done by the different special programs, like No South 3 did a lot of work in Karamoja and is well documented. There's a project called the Drylands Integrated Development Project. Has done a lot of interventions in the food security area. The Development Initiative for Northern Uganda is also in Karamoja. A number of development partners, UNICEF is actually doing a lot of work and they're helping us support the coordination component. They always do nutrition and health coordination meetings on a weekly basis, and we are part of that. Of course, I mentioned that Ministry of Karamoja Affairs, other than implementing these affirmative action programs, we also play a coordination role. Yeah, so we are doing that together with other interventions being done by other NGOs, both international NGOs and local NGOs. Now, in terms of documented challenges, Karamoja, there's a lot of potential in Karamoja, but all these interventions, again, sometimes hindered by insecurity. So issue of security and peace is critical in ensuring that the sustainability of our interventions. But of course, the feeding program, there's a high disease burden, especially among children. Because when Mr. Muwonge was presenting the nutrition-specific findings, and also the nutrition-sensitive findings, I sat there and I was wondering, these are national average findings. If he was to present to us the Karamoja-specific findings, I think the situation would really be really bad. So the disease burden among children, both in urban and rural areas, is really worrying. And if you look in that report on the specific about Karamoja. So issue of, and of course the whole issue of alcoholism is a serious issue in our region. And not only men, but also women. And you know alcoholism, that is a silent gun. The gun that we hear about the raids, there's an issue of alcoholism, which is very serious. And it has a direct bearing on somebody's well-being and health. But just finally, amidst all these challenges, there are opportunities that exist in Karamoja. Of course, there's government, number one is there's a continued government goodwill to support interventions in the region. There's a lot of support and coordination effort, both by Office of the Prime Minister, but also the other ministries and departments. And we're working with Ministry of Agriculture, Industries and Fisheries, and the rest. MAIF, Ministry of Water and Environment, and the rest. Karamoja, as again said, that has a green belt, but also is highly fertile in that short rainfall period. We only have one rainfall, it's short-lived, but we can do a lot within that period. We are documenting a lot of success stories in terms of crops being grown in Karamoja. Soya beans, for example, is doing very well in Napak. There's even a community in Napak that has grown garlic. They've just harvested garlic, and you can't believe that it can grow in Karamoja. As a presidential directive, there are also other crop varieties that we want to experiment, like growing of grapes, olive, coffee. So there's a lot of potential at goodwill on government side. But as the head of UNICEF mentioned here, there's goodwill and support also from the development partners that are coming on board. Our work is now to coordinate and work closely with them. And finally, there's a very critical role that women play in enhancing food security, and is well documented in Karamoja. Karamoja is the cultural behavior is so enriched that it's mainly women who do the agricultural production. They're the ones who go to the garden. But because of the insecurity in the last 2 years and this hunger situation, probably women were not able to tilt land because of fear of being killed when you go out digging. Again, it's the women who take children to school. So there's opportunity that we identify more of these women groups and give them support. And then the trickle-down effect is higher when we access and target women as a source of enhancing access to household level. And finally, is the issue of investment in mobilization and sensitization for mindset change. Is a serious issue at all levels. The mindset change of the leaders from Karamoja at the national level, at the district level, at the sub-county level, at the community level, targeting the elders, targeting the youth, targeting the women, and targeting children. And unless and until we do that, and we, as a Ministry of Karamoja Affairs, we have embarked on that effort. The two ministers are doing a very good job in spearheading the aspect of community mobilization for mindset change in Karamoja. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Tony. When you mentioned that women are the most involved in production, and yet they are the ones taking children to school, I thought I should ask you what the men keep doing when the women are doing this. Do you want to respond to that, or we keep that for another day?
You keep that for another day, but if my minister was here, she would answer that. Thank you.
There will come a time for the plenary discussion. Perhaps the minister will have come by that time and to help you answer that. Thank you very much. I want to bring in Dr. Beatrice Kesa from the civil society perspective and looking at the issue of advocacy, the involvement of women and taking it right from where Amen left it. What initiatives have been implemented to empower the girls, the women, in order to ensure that they can participate in enhancing, nutrition outcomes?
Thank you so much, Chair. I think I wouldn't be able to talk to that because I come from the research perspective, and I know maybe one of the colleagues could respond to that, but maybe I could talk about how I think research could be very, very key in looking at improving the nutrition situation for Uganda. Yeah, so thank you so much anyways. So what I would like to share, and I think this would be very, very important for this forum, is because we are seated here because of research. We are seated here because of a study that is going on and has been done for some time, and there are findings that are coming out and we want to learn from them. So from where I sit and from where I come from, research plays a very, very important key in building a good body of information that can drive further interventions. We have our development agencies here. We have several partners that are engaging in different activities. If we don't have the right information, if we don't have evidence, then it becomes very, very difficult to know the direction we are taking. My colleague from UNICEF indicated flying blind. If you are not aware of what is happening in Karamoja and there is no evidence to say that this is actually what is happening, it is difficult to support the community there. It is difficult to really make any intervention. So research plays a very, very key role with regards to enhancing our awareness on nutrition. I'm also looking at it in the point of coming up with some good products that can help us move forward as a Ugandan population. Banana is one of our basic food. We have a lot of research that is going on currently to manage disease, ensure that there's higher yield, ensure that people are able to keep their plantations healthy and incorporate any other crops. So research plays a great lead in ensuring not just food security, but nutrition. We also have a number of research institutions that are also working on livestock. And within livestock, they look at how do you make sure that your livestock can have better yield with regard of milk, meat, and whatever you're producing from it. We have research institutions that are working on high iron beans, varieties that are able to support nutrition within our diet. We have research that is also looking at orange fresh sweet potato. And some of you must have come across these varieties. So what I'm saying is that if we incorporate research and we embed it very, very well within our multi-sectoral approach in addressing food and nutrition, then we end up having more sustainable ways of intervening because we are basing that on evidence. But then I also wanted to say sometimes it becomes challenging because of the investment that is there when you talk about research, because some of the research sometimes is done by donors who are coming from outside, but there is need for us as a Ugandan population to figure out how we can support our own research so that we are able to also address our own agenda. So that is something that I find could be very, very important for us who are moving forward the work on research and development, looking at Uganda as a nation that we want to move forward. So, sorry I didn't answer your question, but I felt comfortable talking about what I know.
No,
Thank
it's
you.
good. It's worthwhile because the question of research, I like the way you started it. It's why we are here. Minus the research done and undertaken by especially the leading team, UBOS, we wouldn't have gotten to where we are to finding the issues to discuss. Zach, there is a lot of discussion around within nutrition around the area of minimum dietary diversity. It has been talked about earlier. The question of minimum acceptable diet. But many of us just hear the singing. We don't know what they exactly mean and how important they are to nutrition. How do these terms explain for us what they exactly mean and what is their relevance to nutrition in the perspective we are talking about?
Thank you. All protocol observed. When it comes to issues of technicalities, I think nutrition is one of the culprits. We have stunting, we have wasting, minimum acceptable diet, anemia, etc., all those things. And I think that is one of the challenges we need to deal with. Once we continue to talk among ourselves as nutritionists, without the outside world understanding what we mean, we may have a longer way to go. So I think it's good to have opportunity to break this down a little bit. Maybe just to move away from the presentation UBOS made, because they gave a lot of definitions of what that means when we're looking at minimum acceptable diet, dietary diversity, etc. And it technically, again, also, we use them as benchmarks in terms of proportion of children who have these particular ones. Now, what does that mean to my grandmother who is in the village? Let's start with the dietary diversity. Generally, as a child is born and growing up, is supposed to eat. And that is where the diet comes in. We all eat, we all diet. You can put it in different forms. But what we're saying is that we have for nutrition at least 8 different categories of diets that we all need to eat, that our body needs. And especially for children, they need it much more. We're expecting that every child born needs to have breast milk. So the issue of exclusive breastfeeding, continuous breastfeeding is very important. For the first 6 months, breast milk alone is enough. Then we continue breastfeeding after 6 months alongside with other complementary food. We also say, apart from breast milk, that it is important to feed the child with grains, tubers, and other starchy foods. So that is the second category, and that provides fuel for the child. We're also looking at the other angle of legumes and nuts, which are very important, including for micronutrients, etc. That still need to be fed. Then let's not forget about the flesh food. We're talking of meat, we're talking of fish, etc., that are critically also important for the growth of the child, protein, etc. If you listen to Angela's story, that was so touching. The issue of protein comes out of that. Then we're also looking at dairy products, the issue of milk, cheese, etc., that are also very important in providing the child the needed growth for proper development. Then we need foods that are very rich in vitamin A, and these are mostly fruits. We know that has the vitamin A properties in them, carrot, etc. And lastly, we're looking at any other fruits and vegetables. So these are the categories of 8 classes of food that every child we need to ensure that they eat. So the issue of dietary diversity means that we should make sure the child is eating all these foods all the time. But then we have, as nutritionists, and technically cut it down that minimum acceptable. So the minimum acceptable is that at least the child should eat 5 out of these 8. So once you feed in the child 5 out of these 8 at any particular point in time, then the child is getting the minimum acceptable dietary diversity that is needed for proper growth. So that is dietary diversity, and that's what we mean by the minimum dietary diversity, giving the child at least 5 of the 8 food groups that I've listed. Then we have the meal frequency, which again, UBOS give the definition of what it means. Basically, to my grandmother in the village, we're saying that feed the child as frequent as possible, as much as possible. Don't wait until the child is crying for food before you start feeding. The child needs food as much as almost every time. And there are some classes we have categorized them. I don't want to go much details, but at least for breastfeeding children, 6 months and above, at least up to 8 months, feed not less than 3 times. And then it increases as the child also body increases. So that is the frequency we're talking about, minimum food frequency. The last aspect is the diet diversity, which I have explained, but then it linked with the acceptable diet. So when acceptable diet comes in, it means that the child first is receiving at minimum 5 out of the 8 groups, but also you are feeding the child so frequently that it is meeting, let's say 6 to 8 months, 3 times a day. And then it increases as it goes on. So that is how that terminology simply means. To all of us, what it means is don't wait, continue feeding the child. The child will never have enough. It's not an adult that would develop cardiovascular disease because it's feeding too much. Feed, as long as it is meeting the diversity of the food that are available, it provides what is needed for the child to grow well. Why is it important for nutrition, and why is it mentioned most of the times in nutrition? When a child is born, we know that is the period we have one of the fastest growth in life. The brain develop up to about 75% of the adult brain size within the first 23 months. So that is quite very rapid growth within that period. We also know the height, that is the period the height develop as much as 75% again in terms of the fastest growth that we're looking at. The weight of a human being within that period quadruples. So, and that is in the life cycle than any other part of our life cycle that we're looking at. So if you see this growth, it needs a lot of nutrients. That is the period that a human being will need nutrients than any other period. Adults, we have luxury, say, we don't want to eat red meat, etc., and all those things, because it gives us disease. The child needs it because it is needed for the growth to quadruple that weight that is needed for proper nutrition, to develop the brain to eat 75% of the adult size. And that is where stunting also comes in. So once it failed, and then the development at that stage is impaired, the brain becomes also impaired. So stunting is not about the height of the child being too short for the age, but it is about also the impairment of the brain that is not developed to its quality size, but also the other organs. They are all impaired. And that is why it is linked with productivity, it is linked with performance in the school, etc. So it is quite critical that we feed the children the minimum of the diet they needed, the frequent nature of the diet, but ensuring that it is acceptable. It means between the frequency, but also the diversity. So in summary, that is what it means. Now, let me take opportunity on that to also distinguish, because we're talking of diet, between nutrition and food security. They are not the same, and most often that is why we have a lot of challenge. A country can be food secured, it's fine, but there will still be malnutrition. May not necessarily be nutrition secured, because food is one of many others. And even if you have the food, without going through these three different terminologies that I've mentioned, you can be feeding the child all the tubers or the cereals that the child is eating, but there's no fruits, no eggs, no fish, no dairy products, etc. The child's stomach will be filled. So you have cured hunger, but you have not cured malnutrition. And so we need to be ensuring that we have this in our minds when we're looking at the fact that, oh, let's make sure food is available in a community, in a region, in a country, in a household. To move beyond that to making sure that the food that is available is properly being prepared. It is combined at the right form, especially for children to eat, and then they also eating it more frequently as they need to develop their brains, but also ensure that they produce and perform better in schools as well. So that is, in summary, what I just want to talk about, the distinction in terms of the terminologies that are being used. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Zach. But just as you wind up, there is a lot of discussion, especially in relation to the fear of hunger or even famine. They talk about we should ensure that there is food security. Can we term that as a beginning point, and nutrition is now the ultimate that we should achieve as a country? Would that be a correct understanding of the difference?
Maybe let me put it in a different way, that food security, let's make sure that we are food secured. One, it brings economic empowerment because it's commercialization. And we have the agro-industrialization strategy, which looking at how do we produce more food, both to sell and also make sure that farming is a business and not just a livelihood. So that side, food security can cure that. But then the other side, the food that is available, like you said, it's a starting point. One of several things we need to do to make sure that we address malnutrition. If you look at all the presentations that are made, we're talking of nutrition-sensitive, nutrition-specific interventions. Doctor was mentioning the issue of water, how they all related. So many other factors comes in to address malnutrition challenges. So yes, let's make sure we have the food that are available, which is very critical. Let's make sure that the food that are available is not the fact that they are food, but they are made up of the different categories of the food that we have. In our effort to improve agriculture, let us not only concentrate on the commercial component of that in terms of cash crops. Let's also ensure that at least we have food crops that the rural communities, families can be feeding on, backyard gardens, etc. They're all very critical and very important. Let us also make sure that the counseling, Angela was mentioning the issue of the clinics. Do we have clinics, for example, that can provide better nutrition counseling for mothers who need it, that has spaces for breastfeeding for mothers? Are we looking at empowering our policies, especially at workplaces, to make sure that women and mothers who have children, they are better protected but supported to ensure that they feed the children very well? Let us also look at the gender-related issues that came up. So nutrition also is about the gender. Women largely are disadvantaged when it comes to issue of the workplace, issue of employment, etc. And again, Angela's story reflects part of that. They need to make a decision for the child But are our policies enough to protect such decisions for the interest of a child and for the growth of every children? So it goes beyond that. Let's make the food available, but let's jump another step to make sure it becomes something that improves nutrition.
Thank you very much. Let's clap for him once again. And before I call in our last panelist contribution, allow me recognize the presence and arrival of the Honorable Frank Tumwebaze, Minister in charge of Agriculture, Animal Husbandry and Fisheries. You're most welcome, Honorable Frank. You found when we are having a panel discussion on nutrition, and you found when we are going to now have the last panel contribution from your colleague in Parliament, the Honorable Anthony Akol. Honorable Anthony, I deliberately kept you for the last after your colleagues on the panel have made their contribution, especially because your area is to deal with policy interventions, the area of the policy thinking, and as Parliament, you are at the forefront, even to deliver some of this information and sensitization to the people, and that you and your colleagues represent. As legislators, what do you think, how do you think is supposed to be your role in improving nutrition in Uganda, in the country generally, across the whole nation?
Thank you, Charles, and allow me to thank my colleagues here for the good presentations, and also allow me to thank everybody in their capacities. In fact, we should thank you for being around, otherwise we will have to be speaking alone in the room, which is unique. So clap for yourself. Charles, before I can go to the questions you asked, when I was listening to the technical team, especially when they were talking about the food we eat, I was trying to compare our body with a vehicle. That means you have to put in the right fuel so that you keep running. Otherwise, if it is a petrol vehicle and you put a diesel, it will not work. Vice versa. So I thought that is very important to mention. But, as Parliament, we operate like the pastors. We deal with the Constitution. So allow me to read the 1995 Constitution. And especially, I feel very happy for those who are the framers. I don't know if my senior man, Frank Tumwebaze, was there at that time, or he was not yet there. We have to give them credit. They did wonderful work. So let me deal with the national unity. I mean, not that. It is about the national objectives and directives principles of state policy. That was slip of the tongue, sorry. That means the national unity is important. So we have to be united as a nation. So let me deal with national objectives and directive principle of state policy. And especially I'm looking at Roman number XX11, that is 22. And it talks about the food security and nutrition. And it says, the state shall. And in law, when you talk about shall, it is a must. A, take appropriate steps to encourage people to grow and store adequate food. So the question comes in, do we have the appropriate steps?
Are people producing food enough? Are they really storing food? Think about what is happening in Masaka, Isingiro, Kabale, Karamoja, Elgon, Northern Uganda, West Nile. Is it happening? Then B, establish national food reserves. That's a question we have to deal with. Do we have the storage of national food reserve for the country such that when over 2,000 people are dying of hunger, before you talk about nutrition, there must be availability of food. Is there a national storage of food such that we are able to deal with crisis in terms of food insecurity for the country? Then C, encourage and promote proper nutrition through mass education, other appropriate means in order to build a healthy state. Some of us were listening, actually, some of the information, even me, a member of parliament, I'm listening to it today. Are we educating our community to know what we are talking about today? Do people in the villages know that in 1,000 days it is the most important in the life of a child from conception? Do they know it? So what are we dealing with? So, this Constitution of the Republic of Uganda and those framers were actually very wise. They put it together. The question comes in terms of what you are asking me. What role have we done to make sure it is in practice? What roles, what have we put in place to make sure that it is operationalized? If we can deal with that, then you must know we are heading for the right direction. You must know we are helping our community wherever they are. But if we have not done it, then there is a gap that needs to be filled. And that's why we are here. So, the food and nutrition policy was put in place in 2003. Food and nutrition policy was put in place in 2003. And deals with poverty eradication and action plan. It deals with Uganda Food and Nutrition Council, which was supposed to be in place. I don't know if it is in place. Do we have it? It deals with, we should have had a committee that deals with the issue of food security and nutrition at district, at sub-county, and then at the community level. So that where there are issues of food insecurity, where there are issues of malnourishment in the community, people are alerted at a different level. From the community council to sub-county, it flows to the district, it comes up to the members of parliament to be aware and the ministry to be aware. Do we have that in place? That is something that we need to question ourselves now. As parliament, as the Ministry of Health and Agriculture, I think there was something that was put in place, a bill that should have dealt with these issues in 2009. But unfortunately, it did not get its way to Parliament, simply because the Ministry of Finance said, we don't have the money to implement. The law says before you bring it to the floor of Parliament, the ministry should give you a certificate which says what you are bringing we can implement. So there was no certificate of financial implication issued by the Ministry of Finance. In the 10th Parliament, we tried to resurrect it. It did not work. In the 11th Parliament, we had a meeting around March, Feb, to deal with it. We have actually, around May, June, we sent it to the technical people, the legal team in Parliament. They are working on it. After now, it has never come up. So as we sit here, whatever we are doing, if we do it in isolation, if it is not guided by an act of Parliament, the implementation becomes a problem. Because you don't have proper law that guides what you should do. So, as a member of Parliament, as a chairperson, I pledge that we are going to follow it to the dot. Thank you.
Thank you for clapping. But I have a follow-up question. But first, thank you very much, Honorable Anthony, for that elaborate, well-informed presentation. Yes, we need a law. Yes, we need the policy. And good that you talked about a policy of 2003 that exists. In the meantime, minus that law that is proposed, and you talked rightly about mobilization and sensitization that is needed. Is it possible that as people's representatives that you can keep, when you go to meet people at the various podia that you come to, even in campaigns and political rallies,